Have you ever cared for someone that it drained you emotionally and spiritually? Have you been told that your empathy is sinful or is it too much? And now you're questioning yourself. Is your empathy helping people heal or enabling broken patterns? Can empathy lead you away from your God? So, for our episode today, our topic is about, is empathy a sin or is it enabling sin? Hi, beloved. This is Doc Gilbert, and I'm a Christian clinical counselor and psychologist. Hi, guys. Welcome to our newest episode. So, kamusta kayo? And that's how we usually ask in Filipino in terms of how are you? And I hope that you've been doing well. And we're going to talk about empathy. It's also one of the controversial issues that I've heard through the years in doing counseling, speaking in different churches. you know um I heard few times, many times, that empathy means tolerating sin. That a pastor once said that you are just enabling this sinful pattern. You are not correcting or confronting this brokenness, which the Bible said it should be. And yeah, I mean, it's very common, and especially with narcissistic saint leaders among churches. Well, this kind of narcissists are actually in the category of communal narcissists. These are kinds of narcissists where they are self-righteous, they are like superior in terms of spirituality, in terms of holiness, holier than thou. They use their spiritual authority to intimidate, invalidate, deceive, make others feel inferior, and most importantly, control and abuse others. And yeah, I mean, that's why it's not really a new thing for me to hear that a leader, a pastor, or anyone who is in the spiritual authority says to someone who confess about their sin that, it must be corrected. But these are like Bible verses and scriptures that are wrapped into shaming. Shaming that you have failed the standard of God. But in reality, it's about the shame that was triggered inside them. Like these narcissistic people have deep, deep shame, that that they carry inside. And it is usually triggers at being triggered, when, for example, in the church setting, a member or like a mentee failed a certain standard or sinned, quote unquote, sinned against God. It actually triggered their own shame. That's why they outlash, through shaming, verbal attacks, verbal emotional abuse, withdrawal, making these people isolated, making these people humiliated, like, gossip, and being slandered publicly and even like in private. So yeah, so that's so hard to for many survivors of like this narcissistic abuse or like trauma to know when is it like a spiritual manipulation, or where is it a need for empathy, a need for validation. So there's like a mix or a confusion that is being done by these toxic people. And actually with the narcissistic people, and even like the cults, which are also a form of communal narcissist, they use these vulnerabilities to shame, to control. They shame these people knowing their sin or their vulnerabilities or weaknesses. They shame, they attack, they manipulate, they humiliate. And then after that, with the love bombing cycle, they would like shower them with, empty praises, external or extravagant gifts, listening to them, extending false empathy and validation. And of course, for those survivors, it would feel good, that, oh, I'm loved, I'm valued, I'm worthy. And then the shaming cycle would start again. So these people who are in this cycle are being trapped, because it's really addictive. And there's like research that says, that being shamed like that, guilt trip like that, and eventually, would be will receive showering of love, what we call love bombing. And then after that, the person would be shamed again, attack, abuse. So, and after that, the survivor would want that kind of love bombing again. The person would crave for that, would look for it, would wait for it, because it would feel good after like an abuse, after an attack. So, and that's why it creates, as I discussed this, a false empathy. It's just a mimic. It's a copycat, but it does not have genuine care and concern for these people. And yeah, sadly, many times I've heard and witnessed, Christian leaders using vulnerabilities not just to shame, but to put these people under their spell, their control, in order to like get a supply from them, like someone whom they can demand something like finances or emotional supply, or someone they can like direct, do the chores and responsibilities for them. So it's really hard, and it's really frustrating and maddening to hear how these narcissistic people, these toxic leaders, Christian leaders, use that, oh, having this empathy is enabling this broken pattern in sin. Okay? And there's a lot of misconceptions about that. Of course, just like what Carl Rogers said about empathy. Empathy is like walking into the shoes of someone in order to understand their world. So it's really far beyond enabling sin or a sinful pattern, or like just allowing these people to go and sin and destroy their lives. It's not about that, but it's entering their emotional, mental, physical, spiritual world, in order to see their lenses, their point of view, their experiences, and in order for you to understand them, in order for you to experience what they are experiencing, but with enough boundary that you're not gonna mix what yours and with theirs. Okay. And I just can't help but to share, and it is even written in Hebrews, how Jesus personified empathy, how God personified empathy, when He came here on earth to live with us, with those people during His time. Um, Subject himself from the physical limitations, from sickness, even from heartbreaks, betrayals, even subject himself from the greatest trauma and suffering of all time. Um, that's the 100% personified empathy, because that speaks, when the Hebrew said, Jesus empathized with our weakness, and he can, 100% absolutely say that, because he himself, a perfect God, holy and above, the King of Kings, the creator of heaven and earth, chose and humbled himself to be with us, to enter into our world and show to us that God does care. He loves us. And this is the ultimate evidence, by subjecting himself with the physical limitations and suffering, so that, he can communicate to us that ultimately he understands what we're going through. He has empathy with our suffering. Okay? So, empathy is entering into someone's world in order to understand their lenses. So, in connection with that, what empathy actually is. Of course, like there are like three types of empathy. There is cognitive empathy where, you just intellectually understand what someone feels, what someone is experiencing. You analyze and really intellectualize that this person is going through anger, sadness, pain, disappointment. And that's okay. That's the first level of empathy. And, I always encourage people, especially for those that they are just starting to learn the skill, that it's okay to start with cognitive empathy. Of course, many people, many Filipinos grew up in a home without a demonstration of what empathy looks like. Many children here in the Philippines have not experienced empathy, but rather like it's all about the abuse, especially with there's a lot of narcissistic families, here in the Philippines, like neglect, without emotional connection, supervision, guidance, or on the other extreme, like physical abuse, verbal attacks, and there's not much modeling uh growing up inside the home. And I've witnessed that many times in counseling, you know with the adults counselees that I have, when we are in that level where we need to talk about their family of origin, how their parents parented them. It always boils down that there is a lack and no empathy inside the home. And that's a huge factor actually in the development of different mental health symptoms and issues and even disorders, because empathy really makes us feel seen, heard, experienced, understood. These are the basic needs that we have as a human being, where, we get to feel loved, valued, cherish, treasure, and where we feel our worth, from the significant people from our lives, in our lives, um so it's hard. So that's why like training in empathy skills, like one of the programs that we do have, like the journey of intimacy, there is a session where I teach empathy. The sessions, the teachings that I've done outside the Intimacy Philippines, meaning us being invited, I usually teach empathy skills as part of the counseling skills, which is the core of empathy, the counseling skills. So, yeah, anyway, going back, it's okay to start with cognitive empathy. Then, as you learn, you get to experience deeper level of empathy, which is affective empathy, where, you feel at the gut level the emotional world and experience of a person. You do not just think or like understand them cognitively or intellectually, but you feel it in your gut. You're experiencing their emotions in your emotional world as well. But there is like a boundary where you not confused with what's yours and what's theirs. You're not just gonna outburst in crying, and removing the spotlight to this person who is sharing to you. So there is affective empathy, which is a level two. And third is the intuitive empathy, which is, understanding the experience of a person beyond words. So it's more of the nonverbal bodily experience and using the intuition, meaning understanding and connecting to the person even without the use of words, or even beyond the words, the deeper meaning of that. And yeah, actually, I remember where I did a youth camp, a retreat, and I have this intellectual guy, in my group, and he was sharing about, how he is confused what to believe in terms of Christian theology, is Calvinism, Lutheran, so forth and so forth. What is true uh, behind those like theology, from those theology backgrounds or doctrines. And as I listened to him, using intuitive empathy, um, I began to really feel that these are just masquerades. This is not the real issue. And as I connect and reflect to him, I said, yes, I hear you. You want to understand what's true behind all this theology or doctrines. But I wonder, uh, seems like there is a need for assurance that even though you sinned against God, that God still loves you. And I kid you not, this very intellectual guy, in his facial reaction, began to cry uncontrollably. He bursted into tears, and it was so unforgettable for me that I still remember it vividly. How this intuitive empathy is a gift. Because behind those theology, because there is so much shame from the sexual sin that he has done. It's just a protective gear, because of this fear. What if God does not love him anymore? And he wants an assurance that God does love him. And as I connect to that, as I listen intuitively, I get to feel and experience beyond his words. Of course, this intuitive empathy would take, practice, years of experience in counseling. And of course, like with your most intimate relationships, you can experience intuitive empathy, like seeing beyond words what these close ones are telling you, seeing their facial reactions, their nuances, their nonverbal cues, basically like you have intuition with uh, your most intimate relationships. And, in terms of understanding empathy, and these are the three levels: cognitive, affective, and intuitive. And it's actually different from sympathy. Okay, so sympathy, it's more like, oh, how much you have suffered, I'm so sorry. It's more on feeling sorry, and like extending this kind of, you know um care, in a way that says like, oh, how poor you are. So sympathy sounds like more of that. you know um it's not empathy. Empathy is also not people pleasing, where in order to keep the peace and not have conflict, or not being verbally attacked or abused or controlled, or being shamed in public, you just, do what this person wants you to do. And many from this narcissistic families, they've developed that kind of behavior. They people please, in order to keep the peace, because growing up, any form of assertion of boundary or of needs or emotional experience would entail being attacked, emotionally, verbally, even physically. So, this kind of behavior is not an empathy. Empathy is also not emotional enmeshment, where, when I say enmeshment, so think about like two colors of a clay, like red and blue, and then you get to mix up together this clay, and when after mixing it up, you don't know what's the red and the blue because it's all mixed up. So enmeshment is like that. There is no clear boundary and clarity with one's identity separate from this another person, where one is dependent into, and it's not empathy, because it's more on enabling this person's wants and needs in against this person's needs, neglecting one's own needs. It's kind of like a masochistic personality type where yes, this person A, for example, neglects his or her needs in order to give the supply to this person B. Just going with what this person wants, needs, and is believing and saying. It's kind of like a form of people pleasing too, but it's not an empathy. And it's also a form of codependency. Okay, where one, there is someone who is fully emotionally, physically, financially dependent to a person, and this person, whom this person is dependent into, enabling that kind of pattern. So these are not empathy. Okay. So, what are the benefits of empathy? It's so amazing that God has given us the power of empathy. And I did the research with this, and it's so amazing on how it is healing and very beneficial in the most neurobiological way. Okay? So, with our brain, for example, the amygdala, when it is activated due to a traumatic event, where, in the process, this person learned that there is a perceived threat because the amygdala is overactivated. And I discussed that previously, that when amygdala is activated, the prefrontal cortex is deactivated. It is turned off. This is the CEO, or the executive functioning of our brain. Okay, so what's amazing when a person receives empathy, especially in counseling or in therapy or in a safe relationship, it actually deactivates amygdala. So that's why it's very, untrue, for some people. Oh, it's just a talk, you're just like conversing with your counselor or psychologist or a therapist, but nothing is happening. But many do not know that empathy deactivates amygdala. Amygdala that was activated by a traumatic event, or in many complex trauma survivors, it is overly activated. And, empathy suits the amygdala. It turns on the prefrontal cortex that helps a person be rational, be logical, think and make a decision for healthier sense of self. And it actually suits the brain system. It suits our nervous system, which was, activated due to the threat that we've experienced, with the traumatic events. Okay. And with the mental and emotional impact, empathy helps us actually learn emotional regulation and not really deny it. We're able to validate our emotional experience more. We're able to lessen this intense emotions due to this empathy, and of course, with the lessening of the emotions intensity, the processing of it, when we say process, we're able to talk about it, feel it, and be honest about it, and in that way it is being released out of our body. Then of course, there's gonna be better sleep, better mental health, better emotional regulation, a better acknowledgement of experience, which are really really a huge part of one's own healing and wholeness. Okay, and in terms of relationship, there's really a lot of studies that it helps relationships have a better conflict resolution. With emotional focus therapy by Dr. Sue Johnson, it shows that empathy actually heals the conflict. And I've witnessed that. I've taught, couples in couples therapy, that I've handled in the past, how to do empathy, and again, it's also a skill that can be learned as long as these persons are willing to learn that, so there is better communication, better responding, and empathy actually leads to the development of a secure attachment style, where I discussed that when there is secure attachment, there is a level of safety, openness, security in terms of sharing emotions, needs, a better conflict resolution, forgiveness, attunement to one's needs, and like collaboration in relationship. So imagine that's the power of empathy, and in terms of physical health, it's actually anti-inflammatory. When we discuss about sicknesses, illnesses, diseases, uh, the organs of our body are actually inflamed. Those people who are also experiencing mental issues, disorders, whatever it may be in terms of mental, emotional health, um, their organs are inflamed. Okay? So with empathy, do you know that it is anti-inflammatory? It means that it helps our organs that was, attacked or overused due to the, triggering of amygdala and how it's sending body signals in our body to protect ourselves, thus overusing our organs, and it is causing inflammation. Um, it is restoring our organs one at a time into a healthier state. Okay? Empathy actually also shows that it strengthens immune system. And with Dr. Siegel discovery, this is very powerful. The interpersonal neurobiology, where they test thousands of patients in the medical hospital, and those who are experiencing coughs and colds, got better due to the doctor's empathy. Imagine, imagine, that I was blown away by the discovery of Dr. Dan Siegel. Okay, so there's better health management, and even like I've read research that those who are experiencing, giving birth, and if the midwife extends and express empathy, those women experience less pain. Okay, so there's like better altruism, better cooperation. There is empowerment to change, to a healthier lifestyle and behavior. So there's a lot. You can actually research more about that on your own time, but these are the summary of that. So, what the Bible actually says about empathy. Okay, here we're gonna integrate the theological background of this. So, our greatest model is Jesus Christ, our Lord Jesus Christ, and he demonstrated empathy. When he wept with those who are weeping. He felt compassion before he acted. I remember when Lazarus died, he wept because this person is very close to him, and he would not have wept like that without empathy, right? When he healed people with leprosy, uh paralysis, casted out demons, he did those things because he felt compassion for them. That's why there are verses that shows that God is near to the brokenhearted because he has empathy. And God's character is founded with compassion, with mercy, with understanding weakness. And that's why there's a Bible verse that says, Jesus empathized with our weakness, because more than anyone else, 100% he can see in us. He can see the impact of trauma and sin in our lives, and he does not condemn us, but he does, these things mercifully draw us unto him. Of course, there are biblical warnings that are not against empathy itself, but it's not about blind agreement that Jesus, uh, just go with the flow with the sin. Many times he confronted, sin no more. And with the Pharisees and religious leaders, he confronted them with their sin. He did not enable harmful behavior. Okay, but he does have empathy, for the people that he ministered to, during his time. So, in conclusion, is empathy a sin? So the conclusion is empathy itself is not a sin. Okay, this is a gift from God, coming from the character of God that is love, that wants to connect genuinely with us. It wants us to see that God desires to understand us and makes us see that He wants to understand us. He understands what we're going through. And in that way, He makes us feel loved, cared for, worthy to be fought for. Of course, misguided empathy, meaning without truth, without boundary, can lead to a deeper sin or sinful pattern, which is, of course, not in accordance with the Bible, not in accordance to God's will for you, for us to grow in our truest self, to be the person that God called us to be. Okay? So, in a healthy manner, Christ-like empathy reflects God's heart for us. So that's it, beloved. I hope you've learned a lot, and please do share and comment down below your insights, reflections, awareness. And if you know someone who may benefit from this, please do share the link of this video. And if you are new here, welcome. Please do subscribe in our YouTube channel. And in that way, you are helping the Ministry of Intimacy Philippines to spread more healing to many people and beyond. Okay? And I hope to see you guys in our new episode. Hanggang sa muli.